Hello guys, it's Hoz. I'm in my bed. Most of you know that I've got a fractured T12, which means I'm unable to sit up and I have to lie down quite a lot. So I was supposed to be going to Russia with my boss, George Galloway. I was also supposed to travel with him to other places, but all of that's been cancelled now because of my car accident that I got hit by. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, because we're coming up to Victory Day, and I want you to understand what Victory Day is. Victory Day is the day that the German army surrendered, and it was on the 9th of May that they surrendered. It was the night of the 8th of May, which was the 9th of May in Russia, which is why there's a bit of a confusion between the two. So I'm a member of the Workers' Party of Britain, and I'm not talking to you as only as a concerned citizen. I'm also the National Election Coordinator for the Workers' Party of Britain. And I look at my party, the party that I am wholeheartedly, most philosophically aligned with, as the party that I would say is the biggest anti-fascist party there is. And our country is going to the right every day. This Labour government came into power and is going further and further right. They're going to try and have an argument or try and compete out right wing with Reform to try and stay relevant. The Reform have taken 627 odd council seats. Labour has lost nearly the same, so have Tories to the same effect. Our country is going to the dogs if our political options are Reform. And the reason I say that is because, as far as I'm concerned, the Reform Party are trying to act out that they're there for the working people, the working class. It's run by a bunch of people that are interested and or funded by billionaires. That's what Reform's all about. So I'm not going to talk too much about that, other than I think our country is going in the wrong direction when it comes to that, because I want to talk about Russia today. And the reason I want to talk about Russia today is because of the Victory Day celebrations. So people need to understand that Russia needs to be commemorating with all of us in the West. Because what people don't understand about what happened in World War II was the Nazis decided that they're going to invade Russia and absolutely kill and slaughter every single thing, every person. And people don't understand the sacrifices that Russians have made during World War II. And people don't understand how much of the German army was destroyed by the Russians. Because we're sitting here watching D-Day, because we're sitting here watching films coming out of Hollywood about how brilliant D-Day was and this, that and the other. We lost 22,000 British soldiers, which is a huge sacrifice for our country on D-Day. The Russians were losing 40,000 a day in the Eastern Front. Not every single day, but some days there were just 40,000 dead. And the Germans were absolutely ruthless. People don't understand the numbers. 27 million Russian soldiers, civilians, call them what you will. They carried the greatest burden of that war. The Nazis were a killing machine. They killed, in the ratio of 1 to 10. They killed more people than they lost. But in the end, the Red Army destroyed 600 German divisions, accounting for 84% of all the Axis military's losses in Europe. So you add up all of the others, it's 16% was done by the rest of the world. 84% was destroyed by the Red Army. 5.3 million German military deaths. 4.2 million occurred on the Eastern Front. You need to get those numbers into your head, yeah? The Soviets fought 3/4 of all the Nazi forces during the war. More than 27 million citizens died, soldiers, civilians, children, making the Soviet Union the single greatest victim of Nazi aggression. This wasn't just a victory through military power. It was victory through human sacrifice on an unimaginable scale. That is what the Russians suffered at the hands of the Germans. And people need to take that into account. How you are excluding them from the victory parade of today, when the Russians have sacrificed this much. Just a few statistics. Stalingrad, okay? Stalingrad was a battle that took place between the Germans and the Russians. 1942 to 1943. Over 2 million people died, wounded or captured. But the Russians persevered and won that back. The siege of Leningrad lasted 872 days. Over 1 million civilians died, most of them through starvation, but the city never surrendered. So that's 1 million people. If you combine all the losses of Western countries, it didn't come up to 1 million, which is just what Stalingrad, or just what Leningrad went through. The Battle of Kursk, 1943, 6,000 tanks, 4,000 aircraft, and again, the Russians won that battle. The victory is theirs. I mean, you guys need to understand that what we're talking about here. 1,700 towns and cities in Russia were destroyed. Get those numbers into your head. 1,700 towns and cities destroyed. That's a Coventry. That's a Brighton. 1,700 of them. 70,000 villages were burnt. 25 million Russians were left homeless. 25 million Russians were left homeless. This was not a war. This was an extermination. And the Russians fought to survive because it was a battle of existence for them. And the Soviet people, they bore the brunt of all this. They didn't do it just for themselves. They did it for the freedom of Europe. You've got to look at things like that. And you've got to look at the amount of brutality that was given to the Russians. You've got to understand why the Russian people think the way they do, because these are the sacrifices they've had to go through and get done to them. By the Germans, by the fascists, by the Nazis. It seems to be like a historical amnesia here. The West has forgotten. How dare we have, events take place and the Russians are not allowed to come to it. Operation Bagration, where the Red Army shattered Germany's Army Group Center, a turning point, okay? That dwarfed D-Day. So much military power was put into that battle. And D-Day is nothing compared to that. But yet D-Day has had 50 films made about it. Americans and Europeans or British people talk about how the Americans won the war. How did they just win the war by themselves, just on that part of Europe? What about the rest of Europe that was under the boot of Germany? Each city was taken with thousands upon thousands of lives. Who liberated the concentration camps? It's all in Poland. The Russians did. What did the Russians get for their thanks? To be excluded from these kind of victory parades? They're the ones who basically broke the German army, broke the fascists. Militarily, they destroyed them. And their thanks as part of the victory parades and everything else is to be ignored as you don't need to be here. It's wrong, guys. It's completely and utterly wrong. And what you've got to think about is this. When the Soviet Union failed as an organization, the Russians turned around and said, right, we're not the Soviet Union anymore. Everyone's got their own states. And Boris Yeltsin turns around and says, he wrote directly to Bill Clinton asking how Russia could join NATO. How can we join NATO? Because we don't want to be enemies, because we see you as our friends. Bill Clinton was open to the idea. Bill Clinton was talking about it in the White House. They were discussing it. But somehow behind the scenes, unelected strategists, Pentagon advisors said no. Why? Because without an enemy, the military budget would shrink. Why would you need to have 600 billion a year if you've got no one to fight? The men in black suits decide that Russia must remain the enemy so they can make money. Instead of including Russia, they did the opposite. An agreement was made that NATO would not expand any further east, and it was an agreement between Jim Baker, Bush, and I forgot his name, but he was the chairman of the, what's it called, of the Soviet Union. It's the one he first started working with, what's his name? I'm sorry, I can't remember his name, but he had a patch on his head. So instead what we get is 1999, Poland, Hungary, Czech Republic are all allowed to join NATO. So the expansion east starts, even though they were promised they're not going to do that. Russia left those places because they promised them that they would not be members of NATO. They'll just stay as they are, and that's it. 2004, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Slovakia, Bulgaria, Romania. They just keep adding more and more and keep going further and further east. 2008, NATO declared that the Ukraine and Georgia would one day become members. Russia had told them there is a red line for us. You can't keep bringing your missile systems closer and closer to our borders. The Ukraine was the red line. Now this nation has had millions in sacrifice. 70,000 villages, 1,700 cities and towns destroyed. They don't have a good history with the world. Napoleon did the same. Everyone wants to attack the Russians and do X, Y, and Z to them. When you come to their homeland, don't expect them to just sit there and say, fine, no worries, mate. It just doesn't work like that. Expect a response. And the response was 2014, the Russian people, or I should say the Ukrainian people, chose to align themselves and be a Russian-facing country with an election. Victoria Nuland decided that that's not the case, and she turned around and paid millions to people to come and get rid of the duly elected Ukrainian president and have a color revolution. We called it the Orange Revolution. The Russians have put up with a lot, but you keep pushing them and keep pushing them and keep pushing them. That's what you want to do. Okay, that's the final result, is they are going to turn around and say, you know what? You're killing our Russian people in Donbass. You're killing the Russian-speaking people in these regions. We have to stand up for these Russian people because they're our people. Just because Ukraine was built as this big place, this big space with loads of ethnic Russians, you think we're going to just let you kill them, which is what was happening? The Ukrainian Nazis, the same ones who were helping with the Nazis to kill Russians, the same ones that have been celebrated in Canadian, Parliament, are now killing Russians. Don't expect the Russians to just sit there and take it. So that's where we are, okay? Now you can't expect Russia not to do anything, and they have done something, and they've been ostracized for it. But this shouldn't be over the victory parade. The victory parade is when the world came together to destroy fascism. It's another reason why Russia is so hated by the military-industrial complex, because they have proven that they are more powerful than NATO. Because believe me, what's happening in Ukraine is all funded by NATO countries. It's all supplied by Germans. It's all supplied by Americans. It's all supplied by Britain. And yet, every single day, they're losing still. They are losing every single day. Why do they hate Russia? Because Russia is such a huge country. It spans 11 time zones. It's number one in natural gas reserves. It's number two in coal reserves. It's number three in global oil production. Has vast deposits of rare earth materials, uranium, nickel, gold, freshwater, forests. Russia's one of those few countries that can survive without imports, militarily, economically, agriculturally. They don't need any help from anyone. They can do everything. If you want to sanction them, do what you want. They don't like that. The United States does not like that. Western demagogues don't like that. The strategy has always been to balkanize Russia. Break it into smaller, easier to control states. Offer a cooperation, but only if Russia submits. All you got to do is look at US policy in Latin America, the Middle East and Africa. This is where the carrot and the stick approach works. Trade with us, obey us, or face the consequences. Those are your three choices. And if you choose to stand up for yourself, then the carrot becomes the stick. The CIA comes in to try and overthrow your regime, overthrow your country. That's the reality of what Russia's been suffering as a consequence of wanting its own independence. Now that is the mistake of the West. Contrast what the West has done to what China has done. The Chinese have shown us, they have risen to the top of the table, and they are rising with all this tariff talk to the top of the world. They've had no military interventions, no coups. Through the Belt and Road Initiative, China has funded ports in Kenya, built railways in Nigeria, created jobs in Sri Lanka. Over 140 countries have joined the cooperation agreements. China wins through trade, not tanks. And unlike the West, it doesn't demand regime change or military bases in return for its help. Where the West offers military partnerships, China offers infrastructure. What if we, instead of bombs, we exported schools, hospitals, and power grids to these countries? What if we were to build the next London in Angola? What if we were to build the next New York City in Congo? What if we were to make an exerted effort to try and help build those countries up inside their own areas so people would not want to leave there? Can you imagine the trillions of dollars that have been spent on wars to humiliate and destroy other people's lands were used instead to make countries grow, so those people can become wealthy in their own right and not want to come and invade our countries, because the standard of living in their own country may not be as good as ours, but it wouldn't be so bad that they've got to run away from dictators and tyrants. What if we were to do it so that everyone's making money? What if we were to look at ourselves and say, we need to give love a chance. We need to give peace a chance. Instead of looking at ourselves as better than everyone, instead of looking at ourselves as the superior races, look at everyone as equals and look at how you can convert that person into effectively a European-minded person where they value human life, where they value the property they have, where they value the things that they have, instead of having to deal with people who are so poor, so beggared, that they are forced to turn to crime or evasion from their own lands because there are no opportunities. The trillions that have been spent on weaponry for the last 50 to 60 years, had it been spent on those countries around the world, those populations would become fantastic trading partners instead of the victims of war crimes, which is exactly what they've become, victims of war. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, this is the 80th anniversary of the end of fascism in Europe. And yet, as I see reform rising up, I'm thinking to myself, is it starting all over again? You know, instead of having unity, we are given a menu of endless wars. We're giving a menu of NATO expansion. We're given a propaganda effectively replacing actual memory of actual events. You know, what if we spent the 1.2 trillion globally on arms to build New York in Congo, build a London in Syria, turn war zones into living cities where people could thrive and survive and stay and not want to go anywhere? You know what? We've tried bombing people into democracy. We've created death, migration, and broken nations. That's what we've done. That's our speciality. Death, migration, and broken nations. It's time to stop. Time to choose humanity over hostility. Diplomacy over domination. How hard can it be? How hard can it be? Talk instead of trying to kill people. I'm going to wrap it up because it's coming up to nearly 30 minutes. So, as I said, I'm a member of the Workers' Party of Britain. I'm the National Election Coordinator of the Workers' Party of Britain. This Saturday, the 10th of May, at Bolivar Hall inside the Venezuelan embassy, we are going to be holding a memorial, and we're going to be inviting the Russians and the Chinese and the Belarusians and the no to conscription people and the no to NATO people. We're going to be asking representatives from these embassies to come and share with us as the Workers' Party, a memorial to thank them for the things that they did, for the sacrifices that the Russians and the Chinese had to endure at the hand of Nazis and the Japanese. Wars of aggression on these people. It's 80 years. This should be a time for us to turn around and say, you know what? Enough is enough. This is literally a moment to reflect on. To unite, to organize, to remember who defeated fascism, to honor the millions and millions who died so that Europe could live. That's a victory worth remembering. And it's a truth worth defending. All I say is let's try and make that a gathering to remember. Let's honour the truth. Let's honour the people. Let's honour the true victory. That's what this should be. That's what I think we need to do. So I invite all of you who've endured and listened to this nearly 30 minutes of conversation to join us as the Workers' Party and become a part of a celebration of the victory of Europe against fascism. And let's not allow fascism to come back into our lives in Britain. Thank you very much for listening.